The showdown between the security forces and EndSARS activists may be in the offing as the protesters yesterday unfolded plans to scale up the campaign to force the federal government to meet their demands to stop the alleged police brutality. The plan involves blocking critical road arteries in the Federal Capital Territory and Lagos, the country's economic nerve center. The protesters in a tweet said they will block 3 of the FCC's most strategic highways. That's the Kubwa-Zuba Expressway, the Abuja International Airport Road, and the Abuja-Kefi Road. The threat came on the heels of an allegation by the federal government that hoodlums and people with ulterior motives have hijacked the ongoing EndSARS campaign to destabilize the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. While featuring on the radio program over the weekend, Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, wondered why the protest is still going on despite the fact that the federal government had met some of the campaigners' demands. He wondered the government will not allow the disruption to social and economic activities to persist. The minister spoke just as some government officials stepped up efforts to de-escalate the tensions generated by the protests and has disrupted the socio-economic activities in the country. Tundun, a lot of unpacking to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And Dr. Abati is our expert here, but I'll just get the ball rolling. I'm recalling Ruth Bader Ginsburg, since she's still in the news, even though she's passed on because of the Supreme Court situation in America. She famously said that if you have to protest, you must do it such a way that will lead others to want to join you. So the point she's trying to make is not to ruffle feathers in the pursuit of whatever you define as justice. I would say that the protesters so far have managed to do that. Others have joined. It's been billed as a youth demonstration, but all demographics, all age groups have sort of lent their support. But at this point, a tide seems to be turning, and there's some disturbing echoes of the past. Operation Crocodile Smile is one. There's a reason why when your average Nigerian hears that the military is going to be involved in any way, people get nervous. The military has denied any sort of link to EndSARS. They are concentrating on cybercrime. And it's helpful to note that this is not the first time Operation Crocodile Smile will be introduced at this particular time of year. Last year, it was introduced in Lagos on October 7th to 23rd of December last year. A gentleman, a human rights activist called Martin Omirabo, took the case to court, saying that he does not want the military in Lagos, that it infringes on Lagosians' fundamental human rights, which is obviously a really valid argument. You will recall Operation Positive Identification as well. Civilians in Nigeria, because of our history, are nervous when the military becomes involved in what should essentially be a policing issue. Things like cyber criminals. It's intelligence. It's got nothing to do with the army. But it's also making a lot of people concerned about the safety of the demonstrations. These demonstrations, like I've said earlier, have been billed as a youth demonstration. And some of the youth are getting too carried away, thinking that they are the first to demonstrate. The history of civil disobedience in Nigeria did not start in 2020. Let's not insult the labor of our heroes past. There have been generations who have protested. Unfortunately, those generations were cruelly clamped down by the military. People were massacred in scores, in hundreds, and that is exactly what we do not want to see. So I want to now bring up the call from the Speaker, Right Honourable Femi Gbajabiamila, saying that the government should be given time, a few weeks, and then if the protesters are not satisfied, they go back out into the streets. I wonder if that will be considered by the protesters as a viable alternative to just shutting down the country's economy. Remains to be seen.
Dr. Abati.
Well, a number of issues. One, let me start with the point about security. Over the weekend, the military hierarchy announced that there are plans to launch Operation Crocodile Smile 6, as it's called, and that is going to focus on cyber warfare. Now, Operation Crocodile Smile, according to Colonel Sagi Musa, the spokesperson of the military, is an annual exercise to train officers and also at the same time to deepen the level of security that is provided for Nigerian citizens by the Nigerian military. And it was in that context that he provided further clarification to say that Operation Crocodile Smile 6 has nothing to do with the EndSARS protest. Well, that remains to be seen because the concern out there is, one, the timing of it, although I think the military insists that this is the usual time for Operation Crocodile Smile 6. And that secondly, they will not interfere with the EndSARS protest. However, We know that the military also has a responsibility to protect the sovereignty and the integrity of the Nigerian state. Would they go beyond their standard operating procedures? Would they go beyond their rules of engagement? As we have seen in the past, in the East and in the South-South, where previous operations, either Operation Ugueke or Operation Crocodile Smile, were both resisted by the people of the area who accused the military of high-handedness. So the military should just be careful, stay within their standard operating procedure, stay within their rules of engagement, and should not further inflame passions on the streets of Nigeria. And that is important because from the reports that we're seeing over the weekend, there have been government officials talking about government will not fold its arms and allow anarchy. No government will allow this kind of situation. Now, that sounds like a threat.
It is a threat. To
the young people of Nigeria. In other words, those government officials, are they saying, if we see that anarchists have taken over the streets of Nigeria, we're going to descend on them. So in that regard, again, we will advise the relevant agencies of government to exercise caution. So far, the police have been restrained to some extent, although we have heard that there's been the death toll on the streets continues to increase. Although the military says, oh, we have not been brutal, we have not been involved. Yes, in Ibadan, we saw soldiers even supporting the protesters. But in Abuja, the soldiers in Abuja behaved quite differently. And we have all of these facts before us. So government has been taking a very cautious approach. I think it should remain cautious. The second part of it is about the protesters. I think it has reached a stage now where the protesters, the young people of Nigeria, will need to do some kind of recalibration so that they do not find themselves in the midst of what you may call hubris on account of certain omissions that we're beginning to observe. One, the narrative that, oh, it's young people that are trying to save Nigeria now is not true. All of us are affected by police brutality. And there is a tradition of protest in Nigeria. In 1962, young Nigerians, young men and women, took to the streets like this. And they said they did not want Nigeria to sign the Anglo-Britain Defense Pact, which will put Nigeria, an independent nation, under the British authorities who had just left 2 years earlier. Now, during the Ali Must Go crisis, it was also young people. How old was late Mr. Segun Okewo at the time when he led Nigerians onto the streets of...
The youths have never heard of Segun Okewo. It's criminal.
So this is about history. Okay, and many of the youth leaders, Omoyele Sowore, Lanre Arogundade, many of them who were, youth leaders, Africa, at the University of Ife. These were young people who also led protests. So these young people are continuing a tradition. Yes. And tradition is a very important part of social construction. 3, they have made 5 demands, which the government has acceded to. The government has taken a number of steps to meet the protesters halfway. But the message you keep getting from the people on the streets is that, look, we have not agreed. In fact, we have moved now from 5 demands to 7 demands. Some people are even talking about 9 demands. There are even people who are saying, no, the demands are now about 30. Now, at what point do you say, let's pause, let's look at what government intends to do, short term, medium term, long term? Because every revolution or protest, to use a milder term, must have his own strategy, must have his own tactics. But I think the problem we face is that everybody out there, every young man out there, says he's a leader of the revolution. It may have gotten to a point now where they will need to have maybe a committee, a face, people who can represent the protest, who can now sit down, negotiate with government, monitor the process of the implementation of all the things that have been promised. Otherwise, the protest runs a risk, which is that the danger is that the protest could lose the support of ordinary Nigerians.
It's looking
and
like
they
that,
need that support. People are no longer allowed to go to work. Transporters, all these people operating all these buses, carrying people up and down, from the Aja axis to the mainland, they have been stopped in the last 48 hours. Now, if you lose that support base, that in itself could affect the very essence of what you want to achieve. And in any case, the right to protest is fundamental. I said on this program that many of these protesters, they quote Section 39, they quote Section 40 of the Constitution, and I was happy that we see a lot of people talking about the Constitution and their fundamental rights. But your right to protest should not violate the right of other citizens, be they transporters or journalists or medical doctors or traders, to also enjoy the freedom of movement. Because we must all remember, we are all in this together. From the testimonies, from the reports that we have been seeing, there is no Nigerian that has not been affected by police brutality.
Not one.
If not directly, at least you will know somebody who has been affected. This is the reality.
I mean, a lot of points made. We'll just quickly move to our next story. The wife of the president, Aisha, Buhari, has joined the call to end insecurity in the northern part of the country. The First Lady shared a short video via Twitter handle with the hashtag Achichi Jama, which means help the people. The clip showed President Buhari and his security chiefs in different meetings, while the audio is an excerpt from a song recently released by Adam Zango, a musician. Now, this comes after the coalition of northern groups asked the youth to embark on massive protests within the 19 states to call government's attention to the spike in insecurity that is ravaging the region. This is another big story. Let's see what this looks like. Okay. So, Dr. Abati, I mean, I think this just segues into the point you have made. Focus. And it's so easy that on social media, where a lot of the youth interact, the formative word is focus. But we are beginning to see cracks. And this comes as a result of the leadership you talked about. You need leadership. Even if it's going to be a committee, I don't want to use the word sort of like a politburo or something, a congregation of men that can take your demands and move on. Because we're beginning to see big cracks. And this was as a fallout of what happened yesterday. On social media, certain tweets were sent out, certain people didn't like it, there was brickbats and everything. And a lot of people are looking at this, that this is where leadership comes to play. The argument has always been, Dr. Abati, that, we don't want a leader. Leaders have sold us out in the past. Yeah, but I'll also take us back historically to 1945 strike, the general strike of 1945 that lasted about 45 days. The leaders of Labour, too, then, sold out. The youth movement of Nigeria then, with the likes of SLA, Akitola and everything, were talking to the leaders of Labour on behalf of the colonial government. They sold out. But guess what? There was a shining light. Michael Imodu came to the fore. Michael Imodu only had primary school education. He didn't even go to university, came to the fore, became a leader, pushed it. They had their demands, and they got the right with the likes of the Awolowos and Ko's and Nnamdi Azikiwes of this world. So it just shows you that in everything, there is a need for leadership. And like you said rightly, Dr. Abati, everybody's taking the leadership position. Everybody, has been affected by this one way or the other. Everybody wants this reform to happen. The wife of the president has just made this tweet. Your take on this?
That's extremely significant as far as I'm concerned. And I've always said on this show, this is one of our most memorable first ladies. It's so ironic. We were not supposed to have a first lady with this administration, and we got this type of first lady. She wears her two hats very well. As a First Lady of Nigeria and as a citizen of Nigeria, she tends to take an objective position. And she's looking at insecurity. This is a huge problem because, like you rightly said, we've all been affected one way or another. So it's really good that she's lent her voice in this matter. But back to what you were saying about our long history of civil disobedience and the importance of leadership. Yes, at some point, somebody is going to have to come to the table. Yeah. Who will it be? These things, hashtags are all very useful in this kind of a situation. But when it comes to negotiation, it's going to have to be delegated to certain people. Otherwise, you just find a movement such as this, which has been so praised and so admired, can end up losing momentum, which would be such a tragedy.
Well, I'll go back to the point with which I ended earlier on, which is to say that we are all affected. We are all involved. We are all victims of police brutality one way or the other. And it's good to see the First Lady of Nigeria, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, echoing that and saying, please help the people, because all the people of Nigeria need help. Now, we said EndSARS movement, protest, is more or less a pseudonym, if you like, a catchphrase for a whole range of other issues. And if you see, they will say, we'll be taking it one step at a time. There is a hashtag like that. Whether it is police brutality or fuel price hike or the poor state of schools or, the poor state of of police barracks and all of that. And you now see the First Lady of Nigeria identifying with the people, acknowledging the fact that, look, we are all truly involved. Before her, one of her daughters, Zara Buhari, also tweeted to say that, look, EndSARS, end police brutality. So it's good to see from the first family that empathy. But what is important is that the president of Nigeria himself should show that that empathy is not restricted to his wife and daughters, that he himself empathizes with Nigeria. And the minimum that President Buhari can do is to accede to the request by these young protesters that the president should address them directly, not as an afterthought, not as an aside at another presidential villa event, but the president coming and saying, look, my children have had, and these are the steps we have taken. These are the additional steps we will take. Look, these people are his children, grandchildren.
Yes.
So there may be some people within the villa who are saying, oh, Mr. President, if you talk to them, it will look like they've been able to cow the president of Nigeria.
No,
nobody can intimidate the president of Nigeria.
Yes.
Under the Constitution, he's practically a monarch.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, with rights, he's a symbol of the democratic process that we run. And it should not be seen to be ignoring the people, not even just a young generation, a generation that is the majority in this country. Do you know that this protest now is beginning to even move from all these other governance issues? They are now saying, look, keep your voters' cards safe for 2023. You know, so they are beginning to expand the rhetoric. Now, another point about the organization. Yes, I've seen a lot of organization. I've seen a lot of creativity. There is even a radio station now online that they have established. It's called the Sorosokewiri, you know, which is say it loud, you know, talk, you know, be confident.
Even I think they are planning a TV station in the works.
No, but then that too follows a noble tradition. We had the radio democracy,
radio,
yes.
And then
there's nothing
say,
new under the sun.
They also say focus. You should focus. There is this famous video of a young man who was at the parade, at the protest ground, and he was, you know, touching a woman and losing focus. Somebody just gave him a slight tackle and told him, my friend, focus. We are here to protest, not to come and, engage with, get entangled with pretty women.
Entanglement, Dr. Abati.
There's a lot. There's a lot to what we are observing, but we need to see more in terms of organization. They are now holding Friday worship prayers. They are now doing a church service. I think they need to keep religion out of it because it could be misinterpreted, particularly as we have another form of protest in the northern part of the country. Before you know it, somebody will capitalize on that and say, oh, these people are infidels who want to destabilize the country.
The idea behind that was just to keep people there, so you don't, you know, disperse and wander.
The watching of Premier League matches is also that part of the idea. And yesterday, they were frying puff-puff at the place. Some people even go in Benin, right in the middle of the road. They were cooking rice.
Should they go hungry there?
No, I'm not saying they should go hungry, but look, all of us should be focused. Because the issues that they have raised are very important issues.
Salient issues.
Yesterday, I brought it up on another program where I was talking about pepper soup. If you look at the helpline, 01700 1755, number 3 there is talking about food and food supplies. Legal aid, number 2, medical aid, 456, mental health awareness help. Now, all of that is fine. But you also have to manage the optics so that the international community do not think that what is going on the streets in Nigeria is a carnival rather than a protest. It's a protest with very serious issues, and we must all remain focused on those issues.
Right. Thank you so much. That's all on news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the duo of Michael Wilson and Adesuwa Omoruan to get updates as regards COVID-19 and global business. Just stay with us. All right, welcome back to the Morning Show right here on the Rise News channel. We're moving on to business update now. Michael Wilson joining us from London this morning. Good morning, Michael.
Very good morning. Welcome to the week. Begin as usual with China. First of all, retail sales have taken the recovery story a step further down, a good positive reading, a rise of 3.3%, well above expectations of 1.5%. It remains below the 8% gain at the end of last year, but it's still at 7.2% lower than the year to date. But it does appear to show that the Chinese economy is starting to approach escape velocity. Manufacturing also been doing quite well to doing better also as far as the consumer is concerned. This is very important, rebounding to its best level, and that manufacturing optimism is definitely reflected in the PMIs. Industrial production continued its recent outperformance, returning to a steady 6.9%. Now that's quite extraordinary. We also got a sight of the Q3 China GDP figures that got the headlines this morning. I happen to think the detail I've just given you is much more important, but that's the thing for the analysts. Economy grew 4.9% in the third quarter, up from 11.5. So down from 11.5. But you see how it's actually happening rapidly, rebounding in China, and markets thus in Asia have started the week in a relatively positive fashion. And also that China, as far as shares are concerned, you'd look to be seeing like Daimler, the German manufacturer of cars, and also Apple rebounding in the markets. And important announcement between Singapore and Hong Kong. It appears as though they're trying to have a tourist bubble of flights between them, starting at one flight a day. But this will not, you won't be using Singapore, as it were, as a gateway to Hong Kong and vice versa. You have to actually start your journey in Hong Kong or Singapore to actually take advantage of this. But details to actually follow on that. So ahead to European stock markets, and they finished the week lower. There were all those worries about vaccine and so on, as well as the new lockdown restrictions. You've been talking about those this morning. There's still a lot of puzzlement going on, and events over the weekend, including that horrific murder in Paris, in France, have done nothing to make life any better. Belgium, Paris, and France, and here, I think everybody's looking at Europe, particularly its leisure sector, as being particularly vulnerable. Nothing to do with that, quite honestly. And are we into what we call circuit breaker pandemics? A lot of discussion about that, and I think more importantly than that, I don't know about you, but we're seeing this sort of rise of, we're not exactly sure about the scientists. They've cried wolf for far too long, and they don't have any skin in the game, as I'm sure would both put it. They are civil servants. They have a very nice salary. Thank you very much indeed. They aren't directly linked. They're not like small businesses trying to survive all this, and I think there's increasing doubts about taking the absolute day-to-day, minute-to-minute wisdom, so-called wisdom of their scientific observations. And we're calling into question, as I'm sure you are, what actually science really is. Is it really proper empirical results of everything, or is it just scientific opinion? Now, as far as the stimulus deal is concerned in the United States, again, a lot of worries about that. I mean, I won't go into the detail of Friday because you know it all, but will there be some sort of a deal? No idea. But Dow futures are up 200 this morning. So in other words, they may be thinking that might possibly happen. The pound is holding up relatively well, despite a Moody's downgrade on Friday. People are saying, well, yeah, of course, there'll be a downgrade. Everybody is, having a bad time at the moment. And I think they've sort of lost their capacity to shock, quite honestly. GDP will be meaningfully lower in Europe and the UK. Well, you and I could have done that, couldn't we? Of course it will. We don't, there's no problem about that. There's no particular expertise in extracting those kind of figures. I think it also, as far as the UK is concerned, it relates to the deterioration of what people are looking at as the UK political leadership. Here, again, no deal on Brexit. There maybe some discussions this week. Maybe the British officials will water down the trade talks and post-Brexit deals and so on. And Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, has already said that some kind of compromise needs to happen. However, on a slightly more concrete note, it's going to be a big day for central bank speakers. We've got Jay Powell in the United States, Chairman of the Fed, ECB President Christine Lagarde talking today, and the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, John Cunliffe. The Governor of the Bank of England is hitting the headlines this morning by saying it's best that the bank acts aggressively. Now, this is like a continuing narrative about will they, won't they? And the will they, won't they is, are we going to see negative interest rates in this country? A lot of comments over the weekend saying, find me a country where it's actually worked. Has it actually had this effect in a downturn like we're seeing at the moment of causing banks not to want to hold on to money and banks to lend it? Answer to that question is probably, well, they might be, but if you've got an economy in free fall, what does it matter? Who's actually going to be doing that today? There is definitely a division as far as the Monetary Policy Commission is, the committee is concerned. And oil and gold not doing a great deal.
Okay. Thank you so much for the great insight as always. I've got two questions. The number one question is, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and how disastrous other economies in the world have felt, how come China grew 4.9%? I mean, I would like to have answers. And secondly, do you think that the Americans will get a deal done as regards to stimulus before the elections? And I just want to know more about China. How did China grow 4.9%, close to 5% growth?
If you believe the figures from China, and there's always a big if there because it's not an opaque economy, and we've talked about this for months, haven't we? That's the thing. I think what they did there, they got to grips with the Chinese epidemic or the pandemic, or call it what you will, as quickly as they could. They are an authoritarian state. They could lock down. They locked down Wuhan very, very quickly indeed. They actually, in spite of their dense population, only allowed one person per family on a very, very regulated basis to go out for food and so on. That is a real lockdown. That's what they did. They actually got to grips with it. Now, we don't know the detail of what's happening there. We take these figures in good faith. I would much rather depend on certain kind of statistics, like I was telling you last week about the imports of iron ore, which point to something going on in China. And you can also look at electricity consumption and things like that. Now, you can't hide those figures because China imports a lot of that as well as manufacturing itself. So those are the kind of figures we should be looking at. But so that's what they've done. They live in an authoritarian society, and you can actually lock it down. And it is the sort of society where people take a huge amount of notice of what their politicians and their so-called leaders actually say. It's not a democracy in the same way that Nigeria is, or the UK is, or most of the countries around Europe is, or indeed the United States is. So that's in a sense what's going on. You can squeeze it very, very quickly, and then you can let it out again. There's no question that the world is tilting towards the East, and we're seeing the rise of China as a huge economic power, but they're doing it in their way. And finally on China, I would just say it does not ever, ever depend upon political cycles. It's about eras, and those eras are longer than your and my lifetimes in terms of ambition. So that's really what's going on there.
Well, Michael, if you have just a minute, I'd like you to comment briefly on New Zealand, where Jacinta Ardern and our Labour Party have managed to post the best election result in 70 years. How are the markets responding? And what should Jacinta Ardern do going forward, balancing the relationship between its largest, biggest trading partner, China, and the United States?
New Zealand is a long way away. That's the bottom line. Geographically, it can close its borders very, very well indeed. It's a very contented country. I have New Zealand friends, and they relish the fact that they are isolated from the rest of the world. They are key in terms of a relationship between the United States, Japan, and Australia, certainly. I would hope that what she will do will relish that kind of relationship and take it constructively forward. It's very good, in my view, that whichever party it is, and good luck to the Labour Party in New Zealand, it's good that they have had a specific and direct mandate from their people to take them forward into what is, they are they're a long way from anywhere, geographically a long way from anywhere, a self-contained island, but they will have to go along with the rest of the world. Good luck to them is what I say.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Michael, for that. For update on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesuwa Omoruan joins us. Adesuwa, it's a pleasure talking to you this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Dr.
Morning,
Abati.
Adesuwa.
And good morning, Tundun. It's great to be here again, but I don't think it's so great looking at the numbers globally and what has happened over the weekend. Let's take a look at the global figures. 39 million. The world is edging towards another grim milestone of 40 million cases. But at the moment, as you can see, live figures from the Johns Hopkins University statistics, 39,965,414 people around the world have been infected, and we now have recorded over 1.1 million deaths as well. When you look at the numbers, where are these numbers coming from? The highest countries, the US is still topping that list with over 8 million cases. India is in second place, Brazil, Russia, Argentina comes in fifth place. So we are seeing those numbers coming in. A lot of people have different opinions as to why we are seeing these numbers. Some say it's fatigue, some say increased testing in some areas, but whether we like it or not, it's just a reminder that we are still in the midst of a pandemic and there's a resurgence. But let's go to the USA, where the country is bringing in those numbers. If we have the USA map, let's take a look at what's happening. Yes, 8.1 million cases, 219,000 deaths at the moment. But in the USA, only 2 states, that's Vermont and Missouri, have reported falls in the coverage number of the reported coronavirus cases in the past week. The outbreak, no doubt, is surging there. Connecticut, Florida lead the nation with increase in 50% or more. Another 27 states are rising between 10% and 50%, and that's according to Johns Hopkins data. Now, the conversation is sort of shifting from what we are doing now in the U.S. to what we should be doing, and that's according to the governors. The governors are trying to be proactive and are discussing a national plan to deal with the vaccine shortages should one be approved and deemed effective. Now, Governor Cuomo, who you're seeing there, is the head of the National Governors Association, and they have posed a number of questions to the Trump administration. Some of those, it's a long list, but some of those questions include who is going to pay for the administration of the vaccines? How will the scarce supplies be allocated among the states? Will there be additional funding allocated to states to assist them? There are also questions about supply, mundane supplies needed to immunize people, needles, syringes, alcohol pads, adhesive bandages, dry ice, and all of these things, but the numbers are coming in. The governors in the United States under this umbrella body are trying to be proactive to say when we do have a vaccine, and I think there's no gainsaying here that we all know that when there's a vaccine, it might not get to everybody just in time. So they are posing this question to the Trump administration to say, what do we need to be doing? Let's move away from the United States now and go to Italy, where Italy, you would recall, was one of the hardest hit European countries. And we do know that Europe remains the hardest hit continent as long as this pandemic is concerned. Look at those numbers coming in from Italy as of now, 414,000 there and 36,000 deaths. That's at October 18th, which was yesterday. Now, some new measures have been put in place by the Prime Minister, and he says these are needed in the country. Let me just see exactly what he had to say there. Yes, so the Italian Premier Giuseppe Conte on Sunday announced these new measures to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Now, these measures include allowing Italian mayors, that's the local authorities, to enforce 9 p.m. curfews at public squares, penalties for gyms and pools that fail to follow restrictions, and the banning of local festivals. Restaurants and bars will also be limited to only table service after 6 p.m., 3 hours earlier than before, and the midnight closing time will remain in place. At the beginning of October, Italy made it mandatory for all residents to wear masks while in public in response to another surge of the cases. Now, despite that, and despite the success of Italy's 10-week lockdown this spring that hindered the spread of the virus, Italian authorities are now reluctant to return to such measures. What we are seeing in Europe basically is targeted restrictions, as against what we saw initially at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody had a blanket lockdown. And again, I think largely due to the fact that we all didn't understand. We didn't understand what this pandemic was, what this virus was, and how to deal with it. So there were just those blanket lockdowns. But right now, at the moment, we are beginning to see targeted restrictions, and there are also pushbacks. In Italy, police had to arrest some individuals over the weekend. There were protests, there were riots. Bars, restaurants, businesses were closed because they refused to adhere to those restrictions. And we're also seeing that in France. We talked about France last week. Now, the restrictions went into place on Saturday, but we've seen some pushbacks. Some people are saying, we don't even have these numbers. Why are we having to suffer these targeted restrictions? Look at the numbers coming in from France. As at yesterday, 897,034, and then we have the 33,477 deaths. So Europe remains the hardest hit continent. The WHO is saying these restrictions have to come in place. But how do we go about the restrictions is the conversation and is the argument wherever you look. Even in UK, we've seen opposition leaders who have said, you know, let's go for the circuit breaker restriction as against what the Prime Minister is proposing and has put in place for regions as regards the numbers they are bringing in during this pandemic. So, guys, that's what we have this morning.
Thank you, Adesuwa.
Okay, let's go ahead.
I'm so glad that you raised the list of questions that was submitted by the U.S. National Governors Association, because it's so... When I was going through that list, I have to say, I was wondering what would happen in the event that Nigeria gets hold of some of these vaccines. And that issue about cold storage really did give me pause. How viable are the vaccines going to be if they're outside of cold storage? You know our infrastructural challenges, I'll put it that way. And also under communication, how will early monitoring systems about who has been vaccinated, what kind of adverse symptoms that they have, how will that be communicated to the public, if at all it will be? How transparent is the whole process going to be? I really do think our NCDC really needs to take a close look at all of those measures. And I wanted to talk to you about France as well. Emmanuel Macron, to the great chagrin of his public, had to impose a lockdown, not a total blanket lockdown, but, yes, you know, curtailing their movements in 9 cities outside of Paris, and Marseille, yes, Grenoble, a few of those. But now you saw the outpouring of anger and defiance after the murder of Samuel Paty. People came out in their thousands, and not everybody was wearing a mask. There was absolutely no social distancing. We saw that happen in the Black Lives Matter protest as well. And it's been said that that didn't cause a spike in COVID rates. But what do you think? Do you think that that might become a problem? People might regret that down the line.
You know, Tundun, like I always say, and like I believe, we don't know everything about this virus. We've seen the Black Lives Matter movement in the USA and how it went on for weeks and weeks. A lot of people have not, you know, scientists have not come out to tell us a direct correlation between those protests and the numbers we're seeing in the United States. We've seen those protests even in Nigeria here, when you look at the numbers. The FCT authorities were worried that, you know, we could see a spike in numbers. But when you look at the numbers coming in from even the FCT and across the country this morning, there's no correlation. We're not seeing those numbers coming in. So it's one of two things. Either there are no testing, or, you know, like scientists have said, the virus has the ability to regenerate in less ventilated areas, indoors, closed, you know, areas. So perhaps those protests and those walks we're seeing outside, outdoors, maybe, just maybe nature is killing the virus, just maybe.
Well, quickly, what we know is that as we get into winter and the temperatures go down, many countries are beginning to witness a second wave of the virus, or even a third wave, as is the case in Italy. Italy at the time had the highest fatality rate in the entire world. And what Giuseppe Conte and his team, what they are faced with is trying to strike a balance between checking the virus, preventing a third wave, and also managing the economy. Because when Italy imposed a 10-week lockdown, that economy was losing 47 billion euros per week. And that's the major challenge that they face there. But the good thing about Italy is that there are penalties for violating the restrictions. And just as you have seen in Italy, it's also the discussion in Spain, it's the discussion in Germany, in the United Kingdom, and also elsewhere. Well, we seem to be lucky here so far in Nigeria, where we attribute everything to luck. That's the typical African attitude. But over the weekend, there was an interesting story about a school in the Lekki area, a boarding school in the Lekki area of Lagos, where 181 students and staff reportedly came down with coronavirus, although we're told that they are asymptomatic and that the state authorities are monitoring. Now, that's just one school out of the many schools that have been reopened in Nigeria. Do we have a system in place to monitor this and to ensure that, in fact, if there is any spike as we move towards Harmattan, that's our own winter in Nigeria, and if there's any spike, would government be willing to shut down certain parts of the country? Would there be enough data to drive such a decision? So these are the challenges that we face here. In the US, where the governors are already thinking ahead, and they are asking how will needles, ice, every little detail, how will they be managed? Who is going to fund the process of distributing the vaccines? Now, you see a society that is thinking ahead. Are we thinking ahead here? What we know here is that we are part of the COVAX Alliance, led by Gavi and the WHO. And that's 2 million doses for low and middle income countries. Now, are we keeping our eye on the ball as a country? And what is the status of our discussions with Pfizer? These are questions that we need to interrogate to be sure that Nigeria is prepared.
I mean, very valid questions. I'd love to add more questions to it, but there is no time. But very valid concern. For me, especially distribution, cold chain storage in Nigeria.